After the music quieted for a moment, I heard my mother's voice cut through the clinking of glasses. She raised her crystal goblet, swirling the deep red wine as if she were queen of the night. Then, in front of everyone, she smiled and said, "Half of your $1 million estate is family property now. Don't forget to sign the papers." There it was, the sting, the humiliation wrapped in laughter. On the table between us sat a thick folder with a bright blue notary stamp pressed across its cover. The sight of that folder made my throat tighten. I slipped my hand into my pocket and pressed my fingers against the house key I always carried. I gripped it so hard it left little crescents in my skin. The engagement party was supposed to be about my younger sibling. Everyone dressed in sequins and pressed suits, chandeliers glowing above cameras, flashing as if they were celebrities. Yet I was shoved toward the edge of the hall near the kitchen door, balancing a half-empty plate, while others toasted to futures that didn't belong to them. My house, my savings, my effort, suddenly it was the family's trophy on display. Laughter rippled across the room as my siblings' friends leaned in, repeating my mother's words like a joke. I stood there in silence, an outsider in my own story. I thought about all the quiet years I had worked in finance, counting every dollar, walking home in the snow, with shoes that leaked just to put away enough to buy that property. Nearly a decade of sacrifice reduced to a single punchline. But what they didn't know was the deed wasn't as simple as they imagined. There were details they never cared to ask about, protections they couldn't see. I'll explain in a moment. If you've ever been treated like furniture at your own family's party, share your story in the comments so I know I'm not the only one. The music picked up again, laughter roaring louder, but in my chest there was only the quiet ache of isolation. Nobody glanced my way, nobody asked if I was all right. The performance continued. Smiles, photographs, champagne corks, popping. Behind those smiles, behind that glitter, was a weight pressing down on me. The kind of weight you carry when you realize your own family has already erased your place at the table. I should tell you how I came to own that house they mocked me for. It was not handed down to me on a silver platter. No rich uncle, no winning ticket. I spent 10 years working in Manhattan finance, the kind of job that drains you dry, but pays just enough to make you believe in a future. I took the train before dawn, returned after dark, and saved every spare dollar. By the time I was 30, I had scraped together a down payment that felt like a miracle. The house wasn't a palace, but it was solid. A 3-bedroom brick home on the edge of a quiet town worth nearly $1 million by the time the market shifted. I remember turning the key that first day, standing in the empty living room, with nothing but my briefcase, at my feet, whispering to myself, "This is mine." I had $200,000 in savings, then the result of years of discipline. To me, it was freedom. But to my family, it became a target. At first, their visit seemed innocent. "We're so proud of you," my mother said the first time she stepped through the door, eyes sweeping over the hardwood floors. "It's good to know the family has a place like this." A place like this. She didn't say your place. She said the family's. My sibling echoed her sentiment, posting photos on social media with captions like, "Nothing like a family estate to celebrate big moments." My name wasn't even mentioned. Then came the smaller humiliations. They rearranged the furniture without asking. They borrowed my car, left it on empty, and shrugged when I pointed it out. My sibling once laughed in front of friends, "You only have this house because you're too boring to spend money." Everyone chuckled. I swallowed the anger. It was a slow erosion like waves against a rock. A comment here, a gesture there, until suddenly I realized the foundation of respect was gone. The final blow before the engagement party came, in the form of a social media post. My sibling uploaded a glossy photo of themselves posing on my porch, champagne glass in hand. The caption read, "Some people owe their family a roof. We all know who." The comments piled in laughing emojis, claps a few cousins chiming with, "So true." That photo went around faster than wildfire. My coworkers saw it, my neighbors too. I became a joke online, a silent sponsor of everyone else's good time. I didn't respond. I didn't type a word, but I started saving everything, screenshots of posts, copies of emails where my mother hinted at shared property, even receipts of the repairs I alone had paid for. I filed them neatly into a folder, each page another reminder that silence was my shield but also my weapon. On the outside, I still played along. I showed up to dinners, I smiled at birthdays, I carried bags of groceries when asked, but inside, a plan was forming. Because what they didn't realize was the house deed wasn't as exposed as they imagined. The trust documents were already drafted. The protections were already in place. and I had no intention of letting them sign away a life I had built with my own two hands. I'll explain more later. It began quietly, almost like a trick of the eye. One evening, after a late shift at work, I came home to find the living room rearranged. The sofa I had chosen carefully angled toward the window, so I could watch the sunset, was pushed against the far wall. My recliner, the one I had saved months to buy, was shoved into a corner like a leftover chair at a yard sale. My siblings smiled when I asked about it. We thought it looked better this way, more open. Don't you agree? I didn't agree, but I said nothing. A week later, the fridge no longer looked like mine. Shelves were labeled with sticky notes, color-coded, neat commanding. No more ice cream, one note read. My own handwriting was nowhere to be found. My mother caught me frowning at it and laughed. Someone has to bring order to this place. You've let it go. Their words carried the sting of dismissal, but their actions screamed louder. My sibling moved a mattress into my office, scattering clothes on the floor beside my file cabinet. When I asked why not use the guest room, the answer was a shrug. Too small. Besides, this feels right. As if my office, the one room I had guarded for peace and focus, was theirs to claim. The locks changed next. I discovered it when I reached for my backup key in the drawer near the kitchen. The space was empty. My mother looked at me with that tight smile when I asked about it. We've tidied up. Don't worry, everything's safe now. Safe. The word rattled around my head. Safe for whom? Soon after, cars began filling the driveway on weekends. I returned home to laughter spilling from the dining room heels, tapping against the hardwood floors and strangers crowding around the table I had once eaten alone at. One Thursday evening, I wheeled myself halfway down the hall, my knee still recovering from the accident that had slowed me earlier that year, and saw it. 6 women gathered in my dining room, wine glasses, clinking cards, scattered across the oak table I had built with my own hands. Janet, my mother's sister, raised her glass and shouted, "To family property, may it always be ours." The group erupted in laughter, none of them looking my way. I stood there, gripping the doorframe, invisible in my own home. And as if the mockery inside the house wasn't enough, the outside world joined in. A video clip surfaced on a cousin's feed. My mother standing in my kitchen, declaring with a laugh, "This house is already ours." The video was short, grainy, but enough to spread across the family group chat like fire. The comments burned worse than the wine they toasted with. Finally, it's where it belongs. Family first always. Poor Morgan, just a tenant in their own home. Each word cut deeper than the last. Thanksgiving arrived like a storm cloud. I thought foolishly that maybe tradition would soften the edges, but when I entered the dining room, the long table was already set, every seat filled. My sibling waved from the far end. "No room for you here. Why don't you take a chair out on the porch? It's cozy out there." The laughter that followed was sharp slicing. I stepped outside with a plate of food balanced on my lap, the cold air biting at my face. Through the window, I could see them, my family, passing dishes, sharing stories, raising glasses, as if nothing were wrong. My own reflection stared back at me in the glass, a silent ghost, standing just beyond the warmth of the fire. That night, something hardened inside me. I had endured the jokes, the invasions, the stolen keys, and stolen pride. But there comes a moment when endurance shifts into resolve. And that moment, shivering on my own porch, was mine. What they didn't know was that while they toasted to their so-called victory, I had already begun collecting every piece of evidence I needed. Screenshots, emails, receipts, messages, each one tucked neatly into a folder. Each one waiting for the day I would stop being silent. And that day was coming sooner than they thought. I kept my head down after Thanksgiving, but don't mistake that for surrender. On the outside, I nodded when they called the house family property. I smiled when my siblings' friends tagged me in photos of parties I had never agreed to. But beneath that quiet exterior, something else was unfolding. Every insult, every video, every smug comment, they became evidence. I created a folder on my computer labeled simply Documents. Inside, I saved screenshots of text threads where cousins joked kick Morgan out already. I archived the family group chat where my sibling typed, "We should just make them leave. They're in the way." Then came the emails. My mother, bolder than I realized, had written to a family lawyer I had never met. The message was short but sharp. "Can you draft a new deed listing the house as shared property? We need this finalized soon." She had copied my sibling on the message, but not me. Somehow, through an overlooked thread, the email landed in my inbox too. I read it 3 times, each word tightening in my chest like a vice. That was the moment I called a lawyer of my own. I still remember his office, a modest space in the middle of town, with shelves stacked high with thick legal volumes. He listened quietly as I explained everything: the parties, the locks, the videos, the emails. When I showed him the folder of evidence, his eyebrows lifted. "You've been patient," he said finally, "and that patience will serve you well." We discussed my options. The trust papers I had set up when I first bought the house would hold firm, but exposure was everything. If my family wanted to treat the house as theirs in private, I could let it slide. But the moment they tried to formalize that theft to change legal ground, I was prepared. For weeks, I played along. I attended family dinners, listened to their jokes, even handed over my car keys when asked. Each smile I offered was a mask, each nod a veil. Inside, I was building the scaffolding of my response. The final straw arrived in early December. My sibling, emboldened by all the attention, posted a new photo on social media, standing proudly in my backyard, fire pit blazing, captioned, "The estate belongs to us now." The post drew more than 100 comments, friends and distant relatives chiming in with congratulations as if a coronation had taken place. I didn't reply. I didn't hit like. Instead, I printed the post, slid it into my red folder, and locked it in my desk drawer. By then, my lawyer and I had crafted the plan. When the family gathered for Christmas, when the house was once again used as their stage, I would arrive not as their silent sponsor, but as the owner they had forgotten. I would bring the documents, the emails, the proof, and in front of every smirking face, I would remind them of what they had overlooked, that respect cannot be stolen, and that ownership is not a matter of laughter or wine. But what they didn't realize was, this, my trust agreement, had been written with one clause no one in my family knew about. I'll tell you that part later. Christmas arrived with its usual pageantry, but in my house, it felt less like a holiday and more like a coup. Cars lined the driveway by mid-afternoon engines, still warm while families poured inside carrying gifts and bottles of wine. From my window, I watched them laugh on my porch, as though it were their rightful stage. Inside, the dining room glittered with candlelight. My sibling had decorated the tree with ornaments. I didn't recognize a massive silver star perched on top like a crown. My mother directed guests as if she were hosting in her own mansion. "Place the coats in the guest room," she told an aunt. "The wine can go in the kitchen." Not once did she glance at me, the supposed owner of the house. I didn't enter immediately. I waited until dinner had begun, until glasses were raised and turkey was carved. When the chatter grew loudest, I stepped into the doorway. In my hands was a bright red folder, thick with documents. The room quieted not in respect but in annoyance, like I was interrupting their show. My sibling laughed nervously, finally decided to join us. "Sit down, there might be a chair left." I didn't move toward the table. Instead, I set the folder on the oak surface with a firm thud. The sound echoed against the walls stronger than any toast. "This house," I said, voice steady, "is not family property. It has never been. And tonight we're ending this farce." My mother's face flushed. "What are you talking about?" she hissed. "Don't embarrass us in front of everyone." But embarrassment had long since passed. I opened the folder, sliding out the first page, the trust agreement with my name, notarized and sealed. I held it up so everyone could see the blue stamp the signatures. "This deed is an illegal trust," I explained. "No one else's name appears here. Not my sibling, not my mother, no one." A murmur swept the table. Cousins shifted in their seats, uncles cleared their throats. My sibling scoffed, trying to regain control. "You're being dramatic. Everyone knows this is our family's estate." "Do they?" I asked, pulling out the next sheet. A printed screenshot of the social media post captioned, "The estate belongs to us now." Gasps fluttered around the room. I laid it beside the deed. Then came the emails, my mother's request to a lawyer to draft a new deed my sibling copied on the message. I slid them across the table like cards in a poker game, each one heavier than the last. "This is fraud," I said quietly. "Attempting to seize what doesn't belong to you, and every step has been documented." The silence was thick, but my sibling's voice cracked through it. "So you're choosing money over family." I looked at them, really looked. The entitlement, the smugness, the belief that they could carve me out of my own life. "No," I answered. "I'm choosing respect over thieves." The words landed harder than any document. My sibling's face reddened, their eyes darting to the guests. My mother pressed her lips into a thin line. The room suddenly too small for her authority. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt anchored. I gathered the papers back into the red folder, closed it gently, and straightened. Enjoy your dinner, I said, stepping back, but know this tonight is the last time you will ever gather in this house without my permission. No one spoke as I left the room. Only the sound of my own footsteps on the hardwood followed me down the hall. I had expected silence after the Christmas confrontation, maybe even distance. But what I got instead was noise louder, sharper, desperate noise. The very next morning, my phone lit up with messages. Cousins demanded explanations, aunts accused me of betrayal, uncles hinted I was tearing the family apart. Screenshots of the dinner circulated online, blurry photos of me holding up the deed like some courtroom drama. One post labeled me the greedy sibling. Another caption read, "When money matters more than blood." The comments multiplied sneers, mockery, pity, disguised as advice. It spread faster than I could track. By evening, a clip of my siblings' outburst. "So you're choosing money over family" went viral in our extended circle. People who hadn't spoken to me in years now felt entitled to weigh in. Humiliation once confined to my dining table was now on every screen. But that was only the beginning. 2 days later, my mother appeared at my doorstep, holding a folder of her own. She didn't knock. She pushed inside as if she still had the right. "You think you're clever," she said, her voice trembling with fury. "But you've forgotten something." She pulled out a thin stack of papers and slapped them onto the counter. I scanned the first page and froze. It was an old will drafted years ago by my late aunt. The language was outdated, the numbers faded, but the intent was clear. She had left shared property to my parents and their children. My mother tapped the page with her finger. "This proves the house belongs to the family, not you." I let her finish her performance, then slid the paper back toward her. "That will was never executed," I said. "Your sister revoked it before she passed. You know that." Her eyes flickered, the mask slipping for just a second. She knew I was right. The will was nothing but a relic, invalid, unenforceable. But to her it was still a weapon, something to wave in my face when real ownership was out of her reach. I didn't argue. I simply picked up my phone, opened the camera, and snapped a photo of her holding the document. Her jaw tightened. "What are you doing?" "Keeping records," I said. That night, another storm brewed online. Someone, perhaps my sibling, perhaps my mother, uploaded a video compilation of our confrontation. My words, my documents, my face, only this time they were spliced with captions that twisted the story. "Ungrateful child. Chose papers over people. Cold as ice." The clip gathered thousands of views within hours, comments spilling in like acid. For the first time, I felt the weight of betrayal pressing down harder than the humiliation. This wasn't just family politics anymore. It was a public spectacle. My privacy, my dignity, even my intentions, they had all been fed to the crowd. But even as I watched the storm unfold, I didn't falter. I knew something they didn't. Hidden in my trust papers was a clause that had never been revealed, a safeguard written by the lawyer I had chosen years ago, a detail my family had overlooked while they schemed. And when the time came, that clause would turn everything upside down. After weeks of noise, the house finally fell silent. No more cars crowding the driveway. No more laughter rattling the walls. No more siblings posing for photos in my backyard as if it were a stage. For the first time in months, I could walk from one room to the next without stumbling over someone else's shoes or hearing whispers behind closed doors. It felt like breathing again. The silence didn't come without cost. Many relatives stopped calling entirely, some out of anger, others out of shame. My sibling blocked me online after their viral video backfired. The comment section had turned on them when strangers began asking why they felt entitled to property they hadn't earned. My mother still sent messages, short, sharp ones filled with bitterness. "You ruined Christmas. We'll never forgive you." I read them once, then placed them into the same folder where I had stored every insult and every threat. Evidence still. But the absence of their voices was a gift. I changed the locks once again, this time with a new security system that logged every entry. I installed cameras above the porch, by the driveway, even at the back door. Not because I was afraid they had lost their power, but because I wanted the proof, should they ever try to reclaim what was never theirs. Each step of reclaiming the house felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I rearranged the living room to its original state, the recliner, back by the window where the sunset poured in. I cleared the fridge of their labels, stocking it with my own food, simple and chosen. I repainted the guest room, erasing the evidence of my siblings' mattress. Slowly, room by room, I reminded the house that it was mine, not theirs. At night, I would sit in the quiet kitchen, sipping tea, while the heater hummed. I thought about how long I had let them write my story for me, how many years I had swallowed jokes, endured dismissals, given more than I received. There was a kind of peace in knowing that chapter was closed. Still, peace is never perfect. Sometimes loneliness slips in through the silence. I wondered if there might have been another way, if standing up for myself could have happened without tearing the family apart. But then I remembered Thanksgiving, sitting outside in the cold while they feasted in my dining room, laughing at my expense. And I realized that some bridges are not burned. They are dismantled piece by piece until one day there is nothing left to cross. The neighbors noticed the change. One of them, Mrs. Grant, stopped me by the mailbox. "Quiet over there these days," she said with a smile. "I'm glad you've got your space back. You deserve it." Her words, simple as they were, felt truer than any toast or compliment I had ever received from my own blood. I spent January rebuilding not just the house but my rhythm. Morning walks before work, evenings by the fireplace with books stacked high, weekends tending to the garden I had neglected. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't loud, but it was mine. And for the first time in years, that was enough. The first snowfall of January came quietly. I woke early, looked out the window, and saw the yard covered in white. No footsteps, no tire tracks, just untouched snow stretching across the lawn. For a moment I stood there in my robe, holding a mug of coffee, listening to the silence. It felt like the house was finally breathing with me, not against me. I thought back to all the chaos, the parties I never agreed to, the laughter that excluded me the moment my mother raised her glass and claimed half of my estate as hers. I remembered the humiliation of being told to eat outside on Thanksgiving, my own porch becoming my prison. And I remembered the red folder, the documents, the silence breaking when I finally stood up. People say family is everything. For years I believed that. I thought blood meant loyalty, respect, and love. But what I learned is this family is not about blood. Family is about trust. And when trust is broken, when betrayal replaces respect, then family is nothing more than a word. I still get messages sometimes, a cousin asking for money, an uncle hinting about another holiday gathering, my mother still insisting that I owe them something. I don't respond anymore. My silence is my answer. My house is locked, my documents secure, my life reclaimed. Some evenings when the fire crackles and the snow falls against the windows, I allow myself a small smile. They tried to erase me from my own story, but here I am, still standing, still owning, still free. I don't know what comes next. Maybe reconciliation one day, though, I doubt it. Maybe more distance, maybe years of silence. But whatever the future holds, I know this much. This house, this peace, this life is mine. And that is enough. If you think I made the right choice, comment right. If you believe blood should come before property, share your idea, I'll be reading.